Hello, Ariana. It's such an honor to have you as a guest on the Paleo Gardening Expert Interview segment. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Ariana Mullins is a creator of the blog And Here We Are, which chronicles her family's life as expats in Spain. She has authored the Grain-Free Cookbook, And Here We Are at the Table, Grain-Free Meals from Around the World. Ariana, how would you explain all that you do to anyone unfamiliar with your work?
Well, I'm a little different from probably most of the people that you have on your show because my work is quite varied. I talk about a lot of different things. So my family has been grain-free for a long time, about 5 years now, and so I talk about food a lot and share a lot of recipes and, yes, wrote a cookbook. But we also love to travel, and I write about travel, and we've lived as expats for 5 years plus, and we've during that time we've lived in Germany, England, and now Spain. And there have been lots of ups and downs along the way. So I really kind of share about life and my family's vision of just living intentionally and living well and connecting with the people and everything that's around us and trying to really be present. So that's kind of where the title of my blog comes from, kind of And Here We Are, so it could be travel, it could be family life, it could be about connecting with the people we meet. And so that kind of encapsulates everything that I write about on my blog.
Nice. How big is your family?
I have one daughter who is 9 and one husband.
Nice. Does your daughter like to travel too?
She does. She started her travel career at the tender age of 4, and she is an intrepid traveler. She really loves it and has seen so much of the world already. It kind of blows my mind because I didn't, get to leave the country till I was older than her, and she saw so much more of it by the time she was 5 years old than I'd seen, as an adult. So
nice. So how would you classify your diet? Is it paleo, primal, or just grain-free?
I would say grain-free. When we first started out, we went the route of the primal. Mark Sisson was a big influence, and we felt really great when we eliminated all grains and legumes and most dairy, but not everything. And then we've kind of gradually eased our way back into eating more things. So for me, my goal is not to be as pure and strict as possible. My goal is to be as fully able to eat as possible with great health. So it's kind of been a process of figuring out which foods we tolerate really well and expanding as much as we can into eating those things, and which foods are not fitting well with us, and keeping those eliminated as long as we need to, and kind of working on our gut health with the goal to be able to eat pretty freely in the future. Some of the things that we've reintroduced are legumes. So we seem to do pretty well with moderate amounts of beans now and rice. So we include those in our diet now every week probably. So it's kind of changed a little bit over the years in what I think is a really positive way.
On your blog, you mentioned being vegan for 5 years, and now you are your organic butcher's best customer. Could you tell me more about your journey to finding better health through your diet choices?
Okay, well, one of the reasons why I was vegan is because when I was 13, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It runs in my family, and so it wasn't a huge shock. My dad is type 1 diabetic, and one of my brothers is also type 1 diabetic. There's 7 kids in the family, so the odds were that somebody else would get it too, and it just didn't show up until adolescence. So when I got that diagnosis, I felt like I just really wanted to be as healthy as possible. The goal was to be healthier than all of the non-diabetic people around me. I felt really strongly that I just wanted to live a full, really healthy life. So for me, what that looked like was just trying to figure out what the best choices I could possibly make for my health were. And so this was in the 90s, and when I graduated from high school, I, was really just kind of researching everything, and the wisdom of the day was that veganism was the best way to go. So while I do care about ethics of eating meat and the way that animals are treated and things like that, for me it was strictly a health thing, and I was really intentional about eating as well as possible. So I wasn't one of those vegetarians that ate French fries, as long as they weren't fried in beef tallow. For me, it was all about eating 100% whole foods, no sugar, supplementing, basically just doing everything I could and doing it as correctly as possible. So I did that, and I did it for, like I said, 5 years. And the problem was that I was not getting healthier. I was getting sicker gradually. And I had severe mineral deficiencies. I had thyroid problems. I ended up gaining quite a bit of weight, even though it didn't seem logical that I should be gaining weight based on what I was eating. And just a lot of issues. So I went to see a nutritionist, and she suggested that at the very least I needed to start adding some fish to my diet. So I started with fish and started feeling better. And, it's kind of a process of finding out that the more animal proteins I added to my diet, the better and better I felt. I actually have heard the same exact story from a lot of vegetarians. And just kind of that process of discovering that, everything you've been told and everything you believe to be true about how to be healthy might be wrong. So from there, I got more and more interested in other ways of thinking about nutrition, and was interested in the Weston A. Price Foundation, and kind of took it from there, except that there were some chronic health issues that were still there, even when we were eating kind of the Nourishing Traditions style diet. And my daughter had a bunch of food allergies, and my husband had some different food allergies. So when I came across Mark's Daily Apple, I decided, hey, let's try this, and it worked for everybody. So we're all happy. And so that's kind of where we took it from there.
Nice. Yeah, we did the same thing. We went into the Whole30 program, and it just changed our energy level and how we felt. And we've been eating organic for 20 years, but we still had the sugar, we were gluten-free as well. So we still had the sugars, like the gluten-free grains and stuff. So pulling grains was huge for us. How has your journey to health affected the way that you help others?
Well, I think one thing is that I recognize that everybody is usually doing their best. And maybe someone is trying to approach their diet or their health in a way that I don't personally choose, but kind of having been that person who was so sure that what I was doing was the one way and the right way, that's really given me a different perspective now when, maybe somebody's struggling with health issues and they're doing things differently than I am. It's going to definitely affect how I would approach that person, because I think we're all a little bit different. And we're all trying to sort of muddle through, and it's given me a lot of humility because I am that person who, got a few other people to become vegetarian or vegan, at one point or another. So I feel like, well, who am I to, force my viewpoint on somebody else? I've been wrong before. So for me, I just would rather share with what I'm doing and what I'm finding without trying too hard to persuade anybody to do anything my way, because we're all so different and we're all on our own health journeys. So I'd rather just encourage and support and offer some new ideas more than, dogmatically tell everyone what I think they should be doing.
That sounds like a really good plan. I have a question about your type 1 diabetes. Did the paleo diet help that at all?
Yeah, it did. I definitely cut back on the amount of insulin I was taking when I started with paleo. It wasn't miraculous. I've, read some other people's stories that were kind of like, wow, I wish that had worked that way for me. But I definitely was able to cut back on the amount of insulin I was taking and lost some weight as a result, and feel pretty good.
That's good. So are there any difficulties you have found eating this diet overseas?
So we spent 3.5 years in England without actually getting to visit the U.S. And we finally made our first trip back to the U.S. last year, and it was great. And it kind of reminded me about all the conveniences that Americans have, at their disposal. And then I recently went back to Portland for a super quick business-related trip. And I mean, one of the culture shock things that happened for me was I walked into Whole Foods, and I was just so overwhelmed by the food choices. And we're talking about, paleo-friendly, grain-free, organic foods that I could eat freely that were convenience foods. So for me, that's unheard of over here. I mean, I can get Lara bars, and that's pretty much it in terms of prepared health foods. So in that regard, it's challenging. There just are not very many convenience items that I could just grab for my family to eat on the go, or even a freezer meal or anything at all, like that. That's kind of a convenience for people who want to be healthy. On the other hand, I don't find eating grain-free to be difficult in general. I cook everything, and I always have cooked everything from scratch, and I have pretty good access to the kinds of ingredients that I need. A lot of my fellow bloggers are playing around with a lot of different flours, like cassava flour or butternut squash flour, or, all these different exciting, interesting things, and stuff like that. For me, I just haven't even used them. I haven't had access to them. I could order them on Amazon if I wanted to. But it's just not quite the same. So we stick more with the basics over here, just using, the fresh local ingredients we can get, and a few things. I have access to the commissary on base, and I have an Amazon account. So I can order something if I know about it, but I wouldn't be like browsing around a store and see new ideas, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. I find eating grain-free is actually easier than trying to bake and cook all that stuff. And once you give that up, it actually frees you to make the cooking a lot easier.
Yeah, if you can just really get comfortable with eating meat and vegetables, fruit and nuts, then you're good to go. It is very simple, and Yeah, that's what I found. Is like, oh, this is easier than what we were doing. Yep. Yeah, I agree.
So what was the inspiration for your book?
Well, I had all these recipes that I've been sharing on my blog, but I wanted to go further because I really believe that the best parts of life are the times when you find yourself at the table, and that could be travel. That could be just hospitality. It could be, just the long haul of, every night eating dinner with your family. I have so many good memories built around food. My family, when I was growing up, we ate all of our meals together. And when I say all of our meals, I really do mean sometimes breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Because in my family, we were homeschooled for a good part of my life. And my dad worked from home a lot of the time as well. So a lot of times we really were at the table together as a family, 3 meals a day. And so I have found for me, travel and life and everything, it all kind of ends up revolving around meals and food. So I wanted to share more than just a book full of recipes. So in this book, there are stories about travel and connecting with people, and there are stories about visiting markets all over the world. The way that when I was living in England, we would buy our eggs, which was to take this fun little walk down these windy streets and buy them out of a cooler in front of somebody's house because they had chickens. And that's where once we didn't have our own chickens anymore, that's where we would get our eggs. So for me, it's kind of a travelogue. It's partly a memoir. And, of course, there's a whole bunch of grain-free recipes. And my approach to grain-free is not to make a bunch of substitution foods, but to just find foods from all over the world, different styles of cooking that are naturally grain-free. So that's really what my cookbook is all about.
Sounds like a great book. I like the idea of, your best time of your life is around the table. And our family has the same thing. We eat 3 meals together because we all work here on the farm, and that's when we get to see each other. And you're right. I look so forward to, the kids being at the table and the conversations. And, that happens in our house. On Paleo Gardening, we are passionate about teaching anyone how to make their lifestyle fit their budget. So how do you make your family meals affordable?
So there's a few ways. Things have changed a little. So when I wrote my cookbook, and most of my blog was written when we were living in England. And in England, oh my goodness, everything was so expensive. And we're still paid in dollars, and the pound to dollar conversion was not pretty. So financially, things in Spain are a little easier, but we did a lot of cool stuff in England that really helped stretch our food budget. So we did a lot of foraging. England is a really fantastic place to forage. There are laws made basically to protect your right to forage and to, walk on most land. There's sort of no trespassing. That is extremely rare to find a place where you cannot walk. Even if it's through somebody's pasture full of cows, you can go there. So foraging in England was amazing, and it was something that as a family we spent almost all of our free time doing. So we would forage whenever we got the chance, and then depending on the season, a lot of the time we were taking what we had foraged and turning it into drinks. So we did a lot of winemaking and learned a ton about making our own wines, and we did a nettles beer, and we did cider. We made a ton of cider just out of foraged fruit, and then kind of dabbled in meat curing. And so basically all the sort of fancy, gourmet, expensive foods that we wanted, we just made them ourselves, and it was a really cool learning experience. It was a lot of fun. It gave us something to do, and we have really sweet memories from our time in England doing all of that. So here in Spain, things are a little bit different. The foraging rules are different, and we're still trying to figure them out. And in England, we also had a garden and grew some food. Nothing amazing, but we did do our part with the garden there. And then here we don't have a garden. But we're still kind of learning what is available and what to forage. And I think we're in the mushrooming season right now. So we're trying to figure out what the laws are and where we can go and pick them. So the other thing, beyond just, figuring out how to do all these traditional food crafts to yourself, is learning about your meat. I had a really good butcher in England, and he even gave me lessons in breaking down like a half of a pig or a hindquarter of beef, and taught me a lot in that regard. And I got really familiar with how to use the cheapest cuts that he had. And so I'm a big fan of the cuts that are the cheapest, the toughest, the things that might kind of scare other people away. I think actually those are a gold mine of flavor. That's usually where most of the flavor's at. And if you can learn to really get to know the animals you're eating and how to make the most of them, then you're going to eat really well, really affordably. So I would say eating seasonally, foraging what you can, learning how to make your own specialty foods, learning to use cheap cuts of meat, all those things will go a really long way toward giving you a great diet for really cheap.
Those all sound like great ideas. We do a bunch of that here because we live in the mountains, so we have the chance to forage. It's fun. Yeah,
that's great.
So I really enjoyed your article filled with tips for going grain-free. So what are some of your top tips for people to give up the grains?
Well, one thing is, and I think this is probably common advice, but a lot of times people just, they hear about all the things that they can't eat, and then it just freaks them out. And I think that's just the wrong approach. I think you really need to focus on what things you're trying to get more of into your diet, and just go for it. So if you're thinking like, instead of thinking, well, I can't eat pasta anymore, I can't eat this, I can't eat that, I think a better way to do it is to say, okay, now I'm mainly going to be eating meat and vegetables, fruit, nuts, and then if you're doing dairy, that's great too. And just kind of going with the foods that are going to make up the bulk of your diet, it's not bad. And like you and I were talking about a little earlier, Lynn, like it's really quite simple. So it doesn't have to be complicated. Start with the vegetables you love the most, and just enjoy eating them. And then start branching out and trying new vegetables and things that you're not eating as much of. And you may find some new favorites. When I married my husband, he didn't like sweet potatoes, and I don't know why, but after I made them a few times, it's now one of his favorite things ever. So just be willing to try new foods and focusing on the things that you know you want more of in your life. The other thing is, I think a lot of people make a grain-free diet really complicated by trying to replicate all of the foods they're used to eating. So everyone's trying to figure out how to make macaroni and cheese without using grains or even without using dairy, or how to bake all the breads and all those things. And I know that there's a place for those foods, and a lot of them are comfort foods, and you may just really crave them and need them at some point. But I think it's so much better to look for foods that are naturally grain-free. And ethnic foods and international foods are kind of your best friend here, because a lot of them are already naturally grain-free. And so it's not that hard to make meals where there are not a bunch of substitutions and special ingredients. You just cook the meal and you're there. So I would definitely look at, Mediterranean food, Middle Eastern, some Asian types of cuisines, and you'll find a lot of options there. So, and then beyond that, just being creative. It's amazing with the internet. There's just an overwhelming amount of resources out there. There's a recipe at this point for just about anything you could possibly imagine that's grain-free. So if you feel like, you really need to have a lasagna, somebody out there has made an incredible recipe for it, and you really can do it. So don't be too daunted and don't feel like you'll never eat the foods that you love again. This Thanksgiving, I was really determined to find an excellent grain-free pie crust. And I don't usually, go for a bunch of desserts that are usually grain-based. I really believe I'd rather just have something else that's naturally grain-free, but once in a while you really need what feels like the real thing, and I'm really picky. So I don't like to eat something if it tastes like, a grain-free version. I want it to be like the real thing. So this year I found a recipe for an amazing grain-free pie crust, and it was so good, and I was so glad, and I was just incredibly thankful that somebody had gone through the trouble of figuring out the formula for making an awesome, flaky, normal, grain-free crust. So, it's all out there for you if you really need it.
Yeah, I agree. It's so much easier just to get the grain, replication of things. Yeah, and use it once in a while. That's exactly what we do.
Yeah, when you really need it, it's there, but it's a hard way to cook all the time, so make it a special occasion.
So could you tell me more about how you have come to realize that missing someone is a gift?
Yeah, well, this goes in a little bit more to my own story. I was raised overseas. My parents moved our family to the Philippines when I was 8. And I have really positive memories of that experience. That said, I didn't live in any house for very long in my life. I think maybe 3 years was my max anywhere after we moved. And I think maybe, through my adult life too, I think 3 years has been my max that I've lived anywhere. So what that means is that I've said goodbye to a lot of people and a lot of places. And when we chose to move my family, my current family, overseas, I was really aware that I was asking my daughter to be missing someone in some place pretty much at all points in her life, because that's just how we are as humans. We're, if we move away from people and places, it is natural to miss them. If we don't miss them, that means that we had a pretty bad experience, most likely, that there's nothing to be missed. And most places I've lived, there has been something to be missed. And so I do see that as a gift, to realize that I must have experienced something good in that place or that person, was someone who, loved me or taught me something or invested in me in some way. So being able to miss someone really is a gift. That means, that there was something good there. And that is kind of our lot at this point in our lives. Having recently moved to Spain from England, and, we've lived a bunch of places as a family. So missing people is part of our lifestyle now. And I've just tried to figure out really positive ways to talk with my daughter about it in ways that are honest, too, that really validate her experience.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've only moved once, so I haven't experienced that. But, there are people that have moved away out of my life, and I do miss them. So that's a beautiful way of looking at it. your work has helped so many, and there are many of us who would like to see you continue. So how can anyone listening stay involved with your work?
Yeah, well, few ways. You can always go to my website, which is andhereweare.net, and that's where you'll see all of my latest blog posts. And once you get there, if you look at the upper right-hand corner, there are all these little icons for connecting with me on social media. So you can do Facebook, Google+, Instagram, Pinterest. You can sign up for a feed of all my posts. I'm on Twitter. And you can also subscribe to my newsletter. And my newsletter goes out, I aim for about every 2 weeks, and has kind of a friendly note as well as all the latest posts that I've written. And those are all really good ways to connect with me. And I love it when people connect with me.
Yeah, then you won't miss them so much.
That's true.
So I want to thank you for taking time to join me on our show today.
Oh, yeah, it's been such a pleasure to talk with you, Lynn.
For those of you listening, to stay in touch with Ariana Mullins, you can click the link in the description below or by visiting andhereweare.net. It was a pleasure to have you as a guest on the Paleo Gardening Expert Interview. I'd love you to have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Lynn. It's been great chatting with you here.